Hello. As should be quite obvious here, I'm going to be talking about Horus Heresy. This game came out a long time ago, back when FFG was still doing these big coffin box games. I think it was 2010, which is around the time I got this. I've played this several times, opposed against a friend of mine over the years. We always enjoy it. So anyway, I'm going to be playing it here in a couple weeks against my buddy. So thought I'd get it out, refresh the memories, because I don't think I've played it in about 4 years. Anyway, so I thought I'd go ahead and do a setup and how to play on this one. So let's get started with setup. The first thing in setup is to determine which scenario you'll be playing. It comes with the scenario guide, and there's several scenarios in there. It recommends for your first game to play scenario 1, brother against brother. And so that's the one I'll be setting up and following the setup instructions for. In future games, once you're experienced, it says both players can agree on one of the other scenarios or this scenario. Then they can use one of several methods to decide which player is going to be the Imperial side and which one is going to be the traitor side. I prefer just coming to a consensual agreement between the person I'm playing with. But the setup rules do come with a couple of different options to determine who's going to choose the scenario and who's going to be which side. But my preferred one is just the two players simply choose a scenario and side assignments that are agreeable to both of them. Alright, the next part of setup is to get the board out. Now you see there's holes in the board, and that's because it comes with plastic components that you have to place under the board and will fit in all these different holes. So let me get that done and I'll come back. Alright, so now I've got the all the plastic components that fit under the board. And so the board is all set up and ready to go. The traitor player will take these extra bases that are used for converting Imperial units to the traitor side. Each player will take a reference sheet. They're double-sided, one for the traitor and one for the Imperial. So there's two of them, both double-sided, so whoever's going to play the Imperial will put theirs on the Imperial side in their play area, and whoever's going to play the traitor will put theirs on their side in the traitor area. Alright, the Emperor, or the Imperial player will take the Emperor, Rogel Dorn, Jakati Gon or Jakati Gon, Sanguinus, and the Fabricator General pieces and put those in his play area. And the traitor player will take Horus, Angron, Fulgrim, Mortorian, and Magnus the Red stand-up pieces and put them in the traitor player area. Each one of those heroes that we just showed that the players get, they'll take their corresponding damage markers and place them on the hero track here. So the Imperial player will put his there, and then all the ones for the traitors will go here. The traitor player will take all the pieces for his side, your Khorne figures, your Tzeentch figures, Nurgle figures, and Slaanesh figures. I'm just keeping mine in those bags for now, and I don't really have room to get them all out, but you'll see them as we get them out. The Imperial player will get the White Scar Space Marines, the Adeptus Custodes and Mechanicus figures, Imperial Fist Space Marines, Blood Angels Space Marines, and the Adeptus Arbites. Again, I'm just keeping those in the bags for now as I don't have room to get them all out, but we'll see them here shortly. The Imperial player will also take all the Imperial Army, Imperial Tank Divisions, Imperial Titans, and defense lasers in his side. And again, I'm just going to keep those in the bag for now, but you'll see them when they come out. Each player will then take their combat deck. This is the Imperial combat deck. Shuffle that and put that in their play area. Then they'll take their Hero combat deck, shuffle that and put it in their play area. That's for the Imperial side. And these are the same for the Traitor side, the combat deck and Hero combat deck. So you shuffle those decks and put them in your play area. Right. Then you take this deck with this back, which is the Bombardment deck, shuffle that and put that in reach of both players. You take the Imperial and Traitor initiative markers, put them at the start of the initiative track, which runs along the bottom of the board, with the Traitor initiative marker on top. The Imperial player should take the Imperial activation and routed tokens and put those in his play area. And the same for the Traitor. Take his activation routed tokens and put those somewhere in his play area. All other markers and tokens, like damage tokens, should just be set somewhere near the board where both players can reach them. Place the combat iteration marker just up here near the combat iteration track at the top right of the board. Then each player will take their order deck and just put it in their play area for now. That one is for the Imperial, and here's for the Traitor. Then each player will place his starting units on the map according to the scenario setup instructions. So in this scenario, we're going to be playing brother against brother. It has a diagram here of how to set up the starting units on the board. So I will get that done and come back, but as you can see, it kind of shows like here in this fortification you place 2 Imperial Army and 1 defense laser. For instance, here in this spaceport you would put 1 Nurgle Chaos Warband, 1 Nurgle Chaos Titan, 1 Chaos Death Guard Space Marines, and the Hero or Primarch Martorian, and they'll all go in this spaceport, which you can see here. So you just follow those instructions and set this up. So I'll get that done and come back. Alright, I got all the, let me try to get some more light down here. Maybe that's too bright. I got all the units placed according to the setup for this scenario. As you can see, these plastic fortifications and factories and Imperial Palace, they look good on the board, but when you're trying to fit all the units you need to fit in here, sometimes it gets pretty difficult. So all these are supposed to fit in this little space, so they get kind of cramped up. When it's just a few figures in there, it works pretty well, but I think for this situation they probably needed to make this board a little bit larger, so they could have made these plastic pieces just a little bit larger to fit everything in there that needs to be in there. You would never probably have more than what you see right here, since we'll talk about it later, but these fortified areas have a stacking limit of 3 units. Of course, this defense laser and the heroes don't count as units, but anyway, so you'd never have more than this, but it still gets pretty crowded. So anyway, I've got the figures set up on the board per the scenario. Alright, the next thing is the event deck construction, or instructions. So you'll, here in this scenario, it'll tell you how to build the event deck. These are the event deck cards. So it'll tell you which cards you need and which ones go in Act 1, which is the ones on top, which ones go in Act 2, and which ones go in Act 3. And so the Act 1 cards go on top, Act 2 cards go on the middle, and Act 3 on the bottom. So you set it up according to the scenario. I'll get that done and come back. So I've got the event deck constructed. There'll be some event cards that will not be used in each scenario, and those you just put back in the box. Next you have corruption. So the traitor player gets an opportunity here in this scenario. They get 12 corruption draws. So they have an opportunity to try to corrupt Imperial Army or Imperial tank divisions to their side. So the traitor player will point to an Imperial Army or Imperial tank division that they want to try to corrupt, and then they'll draw one of these bombardment cards, and there'll be one section on that card that has an Imperial Eagle or the traitor eye. If it's the eye, then they corrupt that figure and they switch it to a black traitor base. So that they get to do that 12 times. They can never try to do the same unit more than once. So I'll show you, and remember it's only Imperial armies and tank divisions. None of the other Imperial figures can be corrupted. So just for an example, we'll show you a couple and then I'll do the rest on my own. But we'll just say, alright, the traitor player says he wants to try to corrupt this Imperial tank division. So we flip this bombardment card and look here. Well, it's the Imperial Eagle, so that fails. So now he's got 11 attempts left, and he cannot attempt on this vehicle again. So we'll just try one more. He'll say, okay, well, he's going to try to do this Imperial Army. So we'll flip it over, and this time we get the Imperial Eye. So he successfully corrupted that unit, so we'll swap this Imperial Army over to a black base to show that it's corrupted and put it there. So now the traitor player has 10 more attempts to corrupt other units. So I'll go ahead and do the others and come back. Alright, I finished, and the traitor player actually had pretty good luck. He corrupted 8 of the 12 draws that he did, so that's pretty lucky. You would think it would be about 50%, but he even did better than that. So he did a pretty good corruption draw. And now you can see in this scenario, the traitor player gets to make 4 orbital bombardments. Now normally during the game when you're doing orbital bombardments, you can target fortified areas. Fortified areas are these areas inside these plastic pieces. But during setup, when you're doing your specified number of orbital bombardments, you cannot do fortified areas. So when you'll use these same bombardment cards, so he gets to choose 4. And you can do the same area more than once when you're doing the bombardments. So the traitor player will choose an area. He'll say whether he's doing a reckless or a precise bombardment, and then he'll choose a card and sees what happens. So he gets 4, so we'll say he's going to choose this area right here because there's these 2 titans he wants to try. So he's going to say precise bombardment. So he draws a card, look at orbital, precise, no effect. Alright. Again, he's going to try this one area one more time, and this time he'll say reckless. So we look, reckless, no effect. He should have stuck with precise. Alright, maybe not having luck there. We've got 2 more tries. We'll try over here. So he's going to do precise there. Precise, and no effect. Boy, we're not having... And he'll do the same area and do precise again. Alright, good. So precise, he got 3 damage and a breach. So he gets to apply 3 damage to these units. Now this one can take up to 4 damage. You can tell that by the number of spikes off of its base. This one can just take 1. So he could eliminate that unit and then do 2 damage to this Titan, or just do 3 damage to this Titan, and that's what he decides he's going to do. So we find a 3 damage marker, and we just slot it in the base, in the back of this Titan, and then we know it's got 3 damage. Alright, and we also got a breach. So fortified areas provide fortification resistance to damage. But in this result, we were bombing here, we got a breach, so we get to put a breach marker on the wall of that fortification, and it will provide less damage resistance because it's breach. So this is a breach marker. I'll just put it right there. And we'll talk more about breaches and fortifications when we get through the rules, but I just wanted to show that since that happened during our setup. Okay, that was all 4 of his bombardments. Alright, and the last thing in this scenario for this scenario, the order card setup comes next, and it says the trader player places 4 of his port landing and or drop pods starting order cards at no initiative cost in any regions on the strategic map. Well, this section of the main board is the strategic map, and we'll talk more about what that is for later. But the starting order cards are the cards that have this little green skull icon on it, and it says he can place 4 of his port landing or drop pod cards in any of those regions on the map. So we'll just say he's going to place 1 drop pods cards here. That relates to this region of the main map, which you can see there. He'll place a drop pods card here, and as you can see, that's going to relate to this area of the main map. He will put a port landing on this region of the strategic map, and you can see that corresponds to this area. And then he will put a port landing in this region right here, which corresponds to this horseshoe shaped region of the main map here. And you'll understand all that in a little bit when I go through the rules, but that is the setup, or part of his setup. He got to place 4 cards on the strategic map. Then his remaining drop pod cards and port landing cards get shuffled into his order deck. So let me do that. Alright, I shuffled those into his order deck, and his remaining starting order cards form his hand, which he would keep in his hand so that his opponent can't see him. But since I'm playing solo, I'll just kind of keep them out here. The Imperial player, there were no scenario instructions to do anything with his starting order cards, so he just starts with his starting hand of 6 starting order cards. That's your maximum hand size, is 6 cards. And that's it. Now we're ready to begin play. So let's talk about how you play the game. Alright, so how do you play the game? Well, the game is played in a series of rounds. In each round you'll have an action step, an advance initiative marker step, a change of initiative step if necessary, and then a resolve special phases step if necessary. So whoever is the current player, and the current player will always be the player whose initiative marker is closest to the start of the initiative track. If the 2 markers, if one's on top of the other, then the one on top is considered to be the current player, or the one that's closest to the start of the initiative track. So at the beginning of this game, the trader player has the initiative and is the current player. So the current player during the action step can do one of several things. You can place an order on the strategic map, which that's this area here. And remember, during setup, the trader player got to place 4 orders on the strategic map. But one of the things you can do during your action step is place an order on the strategic map, and that costs 1 initiative. So let's just take a look at an order card real quick. It tells you what you can do when you execute this order. So for instance, this one says you can attack a target area in this region. Now if you play it, if you place that order on the strategic map, when you execute it from the strategic map, you have to do it in the region from where you played that card from. However, if you just play it from your hand, then you can choose any region. So instance, again, this one says target an area in this region from any number of adjacent origin areas, fight 6 iterations of combat. Well, we'll talk about combat later, but I just wanted to show you an order card is usually going to let you perform an attack or move or put units on the board, something like that. Now, this cost over here is the initiative cost to play a card if you play it from your hand. So this one would cost 3 initiative if you played it from your hand, whereas, for instance, this one would cost 2. So, as I was saying, one of the things you can do during your action step is to place an order card, from your hand on the strategic map. Now, if you do that, then when you end up executing the order from that map, you have to do it in the region from where you played it. But that costs 1 initiative. Then one of the other things you can do during your action step is to play a card from the strategic map, and that also costs 1 initiative point. So as you can see, if you do that, instead of paying 3 initiative for this card, it would end up only costing you 2 initiative. During each round, you only get to take 1 action. So if you decided you're going to place an order on the strategic map, that's your action for that round. Then you would go to the next step, which is the advance initiative marker. So if you place an order on the strategic map, that costs 1 initiative, so you'd go to the advance initiative marker step, and you'd have to advance your initiative marker. Now, there is a change of initiative because the trader marker is no longer the closest one to the start of the track. So now we've changed initiative. So we would have to do steps that take place during the change of initiative, which is you have combat in areas that have coexisting units. So for instance, here where we have both a trader and imperial units, we would have a battle. Here where we have both trader and imperial units, and here where we have both trader and imperial units. And here. So we would have to, during this first change of initiative step, we would have to fight coexistent battles in each one of those areas. Also in the change of initiative step, after you fought coexistent battles, that's when you check stacking limits. So stacking limits in these normal areas is 6 units. Heroes do not count as a unit for stacking limits, and defense lasers do not count as a unit for stacking limits. But all the other figures do. So in the main areas, stacking limit is 6. In any of these fortified areas, which are these plastic areas, and each of these little areas in the palace here, your stacking limit is 3. Again, heroes and defense lasers don't count towards that. So, after coexistent battles, if any of the areas had more units than allowed, then the player that had units there would have to remove them down to the stacking limit. But let's go ahead and go back to the things you can do on during your action step. So, as we said, you can place an order on the strategic map, and that costs 1 initiative. And so you would have to move your initiative marker 1 step forward. You can execute an order from the strategic map. That's when you actually pick one up and do what the order that it says there. And again, that only costs 1 initiative point. So you'd move your initiative marker 1. You can execute an order from your hand, and that's when you would actually, if you do that, you have to pay the amount of initiative depending on the card. Like I was saying, this one would cost 3 initiative, this one would cost 2, this one would cost 1. And again, that's how many spaces you would have. So if it was the beginning of the game and you played this card from your hand, during the advanced initiative marker step, you'd have to move your initiative marker 3 forward. The other thing you can do is bury an order. So, for instance, if somebody had, if the Imperial player had on his turn placed an order on the strategic map and he placed his order there, and you may then the traitor player wouldn't be able to execute his card, because when you execute an order from the strategic map, you can only execute the top card from one region. So if the traitor player needed to execute the card he had there, he may, for his action step, decide to bury an order. So you can take the top card, your own or your opponent's, and place it on the bottom of the stack, and that cost 1 initiative, so you'd have to move your initiative marker forward 1. And then the last thing you can do is draw an order from your order deck or your reserve. We haven't talked about the reserve yet, but we'll do that here in a minute. But if you do that, that costs 1 initiative. Let's talk about the reserve for a minute. You'll notice some order cards. I said at the beginning of the game, the ones or during setup, that the cards with this skull are your starting hand cards, starting order cards. But some of these cards you'll see have this recycle symbol on them. So normally when you execute an order or play a card to execute the order, you discard that card and it goes into your discard pile, order card discard pile. But if the card has this recycle symbol, then you put it in your reserve. It's not in your hand anymore, but then when you do a draw an order, like if you do a draw an order from your reserve or deck for your action, you can choose any of the cards that are in your reserve, or you just draw from the top of the deck. So cards that are in your reserve are always available for you to draw. There's another time you'll be able to draw cards, and that's in the order phase, and we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to talking about the different phases. And we'll talk about those phases here in a second. So again, remember, during a round, the current player will get to do one of these actions: place an order on the strategic map, execute an order from the strategic map, execute an order from their hand, bury an order, or draw an order from their reserve or deck. So they'll do one of those things. Then you go to the advance initiative marker step. So you advance your initiative marker depending on what action you took. Usually it's going to be you're advancing at 1, but if you executed an order from your hand, it could be from 0 to 3. Then, as we already mentioned, if there is a change of initiative because the current player's initiative marker advances further along than the other player's marker, so the other player's marker is closer to the start of the initiative track, then there is a change of initiative, and you'll do those steps we talked about, have coexistent battles, and check stacking limits, and then you'll resolve any events that the current player's marker has passed. Now there could be some cards or something that you've played that advance your opponent's marker, but you only resolve phases where the current player, whoever the current player is, and the current player does not change until the beginning of the next round. So even though you have a change of initiative and the current player will change at the beginning of the next round, that doesn't happen until the beginning of the next round. So you only execute events that the current player's initiative marker has landed on or passed. So let's look at those different possible events. You have the order phase, where you can discard any orders from your hand, and then you can move any orders from your reserve to your hand, or draw cards from your order deck up until your hand has 6 cards. So you can only have a maximum of 6 cards. So if you do the order phase, you can discard any orders from your hand and then draw from your reserve or your deck up to 6 cards. During the event phase, if you have to execute that, then you draw and resolve the top card from the event deck. Remember, at the beginning of the game, we built the event deck, so if somebody's marker passes the event phase, and there'll be 10 of those along the initiative track. Now, you may not execute all 10 because the game could possibly end before that happens, but anytime the current player's marker lands on or passes the event phase when you're doing the special phases step at the end of a round, you'll draw the top card of the event deck and do whatever it says. Okay? Then you have the refresh phase, where you'll remove any activation markers showing activation icons, or flip any routed activation markers over to the activation side. So we haven't talked about activation markers yet, but we're about to talk about that when we actually talk about the details of executing an order, which I think is what we should get to now. So let's look at this order card from the Imperial player. Attack. Attack a target in an area in this region. Now remember, if you're playing it from your hand, you can pick any region. If you've played it from the strategic map, you have to use the region from where you had played the card. So if you had played the card from this region, then you could only choose a target area that's in that region. So that would be this area here. But if you play it in your hand, you can choose any region. So or from your hand. So you attack a target area in this region from one adjacent origin area and fight 4 iterations of combat. And here it says you're going to activate the target area and the origin area. So we'll say, if we were going to do this, attack a target area in this region, we'll say he's going to use this region. And these fortifications that span multiple regions, they are, well, this one doesn't. Most of the regions are separated by these crevasses. The only place that it's not is up here, and then this says a region division, so that whole section there is a region. And again, you can see them here in the picture, but you'll see some of these fortifications, any of these with a dotted line, they share borders with multiple regions. So this one is in this region and this region. This one is in this region and this region. This one is in this region and this region and this region. So so we'll just say for this example, if you're going to attack a target area in this region, and we'll pick this region. That could include this fortification. You'll activate the target area and the origin area. So if my origin area is here, I would put an Imperial activation marker here and my target area here. And then fight 4 iterations of combat. We'll talk about combat here in just a second, but I wanted to talk about activation markers. So wherever one side has their activation markers, they can't in future turns order those units. So I couldn't, in the next time it's my turn, I couldn't play another order to move or attack with these units because they already have an activation marker. Now later in the game, during these refresh phases, is mostly when those activation markers get picked up. And when that happens, everybody picks up all their activation markers, and then those units are free to be ordered again. So again, now if a space has an activation marker from your side in it, it only prevents you from ordering units that are in that area. You could still, I could still move units from this area into this area. I mean, if these enemies weren't here. We'll talk about movement here in a minute, but you can move other units that don't have an activation marker into an area with one of your activation markers, or have them attack an area that has one of your activation markers. You just can't order units that where there is an activation marker to attack or to move. I hope that makes sense. I wanted to show another example on an order card. Some of them have a strategic effect you see here. So for instance, normally if you play this card from your hand, choose a destination area in this region, move any units and heroes from any number of areas to this destination area, and then activate this destination area. But has a strategic effect of do not activate the destination area. The difference is if you play this from your hand, you don't use the strategic effect. If you had placed this on the strategic map and then for your turn you execute an order from the strategic map and play that order, then you get to use its strategic effect. So you only use the strategic effect if you've executed the order from the strategic map and not straight from your hand. One other thing we need to talk about when executing orders from the strategic map, you can't do that. You can't execute an order that you placed on the strategic map during that same until there's been a change of initiative. For instance, if the initiative track looked like this, the Imperial player has initiative because they're closest to the start of the track, so it's their action step. They decide they're going to place an order on the strategic map. They place this order. Then that cost 1 initiative, so they move their initiative marker. Now, their initiative marker has not passed the traitor player's initiative marker. It's on top of it, so the Imperial player still has initiative. So after they would check if there's a change of initiative, which there isn't, and if they haven't done a special event they've got to do, then it's back to the beginning of the round where it's action step. Well, because the Imperial player still has initiative, they get to take another action. They can't then come and execute this order they just placed on their last turn. You can only execute an order if there has been a change of initiative since you placed that order. That keeps you from, placing an order that costs 3, that when you know for 1 point that you're immediately going to get to take another turn because your initiative marker is not going to pass the other players, and then so then you'd get to play that card for 1. So really you're playing a cost 3 card for only a cost of 2. So it kind of prevents you from doing that in that way. So again, you can only play a card that you've placed on the strategic map after there's been a change of initiative. So if he decided to take another action where maybe he played a card that he had placed previously, played that's going to cost him 1 initiative. So now he advances. Now there'd be an event phase where he advanced, draw an event card. Then it would be the trader player's turn, because his initiative marker is now closest to the start of the track. So say the trader player plays something that costs 2 initiative. Now it's the Imperial player's turn again. Well, now he would be able to play this card that he played the last time he had initiative. Alright, so I hope that makes sense to you. Alright, let's talk about movement. So if you played this card, it says choose a destination area in this region. Again, if you're playing it from your hand, you can choose any region. If you're playing it from the strategic map, you have to play it. So if you played that card from this region, you would have to choose a destination in this region. So here, in this region here, and it says move any units and heroes from any number of areas to the destination area. So that when it says move, that doesn't just mean you can just grab units from anywhere on the board and move them to that area. And it does say activate that destination area. So just for example, we'll say this is the destination area I choose. And then I can move any units and heroes from any number of areas to the destination area. Well, most units have a movement of 2. So they have to be able to reach that destination area within their movement allowance. So this guy could move 1, 2, and he could get there. These guys, if they wanted to move there, that's just 1 for them. They could easily move there. Tank divisions have a movement of 3, so he could get there. He could either go 1, 2, or 1, 2. It wouldn't even take him 3. Tank divisions have a movement of 3. Space Marines have a movement of 3, and heroes have a movement of 3. But you can't move through an enemy area. So, for instance, these Space Marines here, let me move Rogaldorn out of the way there. They couldn't move 1, 2 to get there because you can't move through an enemy area, and right now the enemy controls this area. And they could go 1, 2. Well, they couldn't get there that way either. For one thing, a crevasse costs 2 movement points. So if they tried, they wouldn't be able to move across that, because that would be 1, 2, and then it would be 3, 4 to move there. If they were here, they could go 1, 2, 3. They still couldn't get there. The only way they could get there if they was here, that would be 1, 2, 3. So again, crossing a crevasse or a crevasse costs 2 movement points. And most normal units or Imperial Army units have 2 movement points. Most of the like the Titan, everything has 2 movement points, except for Space Marines have 3, and Imperial tank divisions have 3, and heroes have 3. So again, the unit you're moving to the destination has to be able to make it there within their movement allowance. Otherwise, you can't move. You can't move them part of the way there. They either have to be able to make it or not. A Chaos Thunderhawk, which doesn't start on the board, but they actually have a movement of 5, and when they cross a crevasse or a crevasse, that only counts as 1 movement point for them. and they can move through enemy areas. And units can only move through friendly or neutral areas. You can't move, like you couldn't move through a contested area. Like this unit couldn't try to move through here because it's contested. It's got both enemy and friendly units. But again, the Chaos Thunderhawk can. It ignores enemy in contested areas. It can just move through, and again, it can move 5. And one other thing, again, I mentioned that it says you have to choose a destination area in this region. So, again, I said if I played it from here, my destination area would be here. That doesn't mean the units you're moving to that area have to come from that region. They could come from outside that region as long as they could reach that area with their movement allowance. But the destination area has to be in the region from whence you played it. Another thing I wanted to mention is these Chaos Thunderhawks. When they're moving, they can do a flying transport ability. So they have a rank of 2. Again, that's the number of notches or spikes here on their base. So that's the number of units they can pick up and transport when they're moving. So again, I said they could move 5. So this unit could, this flying transport Thunderhawk could move in here, pick up this unit, move here, drop off this unit, and move here. I can move 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could pick up a total of 2 units, so it actually could have picked up both these units. And when it's flying, since it can go through enemy occupied areas, it can carry those. Now, it couldn't drop them off in an enemy occupied area, but it could drop them off here. So anyway, just wanted to mention that these units can pick up units and drop units off as they're moving. Now, when they get to their destination, they have to drop them off. They can't keep them like they're loaded inside or whatever. So they have to drop off any units at their final destination if they didn't drop them off along the way. Alright, I guess we should talk about combat. So we'll give a couple of examples. First, as I had mentioned, when there's a change of initiative, so let's say the trader player had taken an action, carried out that action, it caused him to move his iteration or initiative marker forward 1. So then you have a change of initiative in the change of initiative step. And as I mentioned, in the change of initiative step, first thing you do is have coexistent battles. So we'll just show an example of one. We'll do an easy one right here. We would, I said we would actually have, at the beginning of this game, we would have 4 coexistent battles, but I'll just show a simple one to start out. So, in a coexistent battle, everyone in that area is engaged in the combat. When we talk about a different, like a combat from an attack order or something, there'll be a few different steps where you decide who's going to be in the combat. But in a coexistent battle, everyone coexisting in that area is in the combat. So then both players will draw combat cards. So to decide how many combat cards you get, you add up the rank of all your participating units and divide by 2 and round up. So for this one, it's pretty simple. You have the trader player has a rank of 1. Again, remember that's the pips. 1, 2. So a total of rank of 2 divided by 2 is 1. So he gets 1 combat card. So he'll draw this 1 combat card into his hand. The Imperial player, this tank division has a rank of 2 plus 1, so that's 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. You round up so he gets 2 combat cards. So he would draw 2 combat cards into his hand. Now in a coexistent battle, the traitor player is always considered the defender, and the Imperial player is always considered the attacker. Now, thematically, that does not make sense to me, because if you know anything about, the Horus Heresy, it was the traitor players, or the traitor forces who were attacking the Imperial forces on Earth. So you would think, thematically, that the Imperial players would be the defender. But anyway, for whatever reason, I'm not the designer. In coexistent battles, the traitor player is always the defender, and the Imperial player is the attacker. So the defender gets to decide which player starts out as active and which one's passive. Now, in a coexistent battles, you can fight up to 8 iterations of combat. Remember, we have this combat iteration track. And in a coexistent battle, you can fight up to 8 iterations. With attack orders, it may say, I think we saw an example of one earlier that said you can fight up to 6 iterations. But in a coexistent battle, so you fight 8 iterations. So if you put the we'll put the marker on the first iteration. In the again, in the defender in a battle always gets to choose who is active and who's passive in the first iteration of combat, and then it'll alternate after that. So the active player is the player who will be dealing damage, and the passive player is the player who will be trying to reduce damage. And then in the next iteration, the player that was passive in the first iteration becomes active, and then he'll be dealing damage, and so forth. So we'll see that in this example. So in this example, it's the first iteration of combat. Again, the defender, which is the traitor player, gets to decide who's active. So he says he's going to be active. Well, he only has 1 combat card to choose from. Well, let's look at this combat card real quick. This is just the name of the combat card. This is the amount of damage the combat card will do. And this is the special effect. Now, if it has this plus sign, it's a free special effect. We'll look at this one of the Imperial players. It doesn't have the plus sign. It's not a free special effect. So if you have several combat cards that you're going to play, you can choose one for its special effect if you meet the requirement. So like the requirement for this combat card is you would have to have Space Marine in the battle. So if you wanted to use that special effect and you had Space Marine, then you could, and you do this effect. Now, when you're doing combat, you can always do one special effect and any number of free special effects, which are the ones with the plus sign, but only if you meet the requirement. So again, it's the Imperial player. They have the 1 card. They're active, so they're going to play this card to deal 2 damage. Now, they don't meet the requirement of this free special effect because they have no hero. So they're just going to play it to do 2 damage. Now, these icons here are shields. That's what you use to resist damage when you're the passive player. So, again, we'll say it's the first iteration. The traitor player is playing this combat card, and he's doing 2 points of damage. Now, the passive player, the Imperial player, these are his 2 cards. Oh, and I didn't mention, for each iteration of combat, you can play a number of cards up to the number of that iteration. So, like in the first iteration, you can only play 1 combat card. Now, in this case, it didn't matter because he only had 1, but sometimes you may have, 10 combat cards. But in the first iteration, you can only play one card, and the active player can only play one card. The passive player can only defend with one card. Then in the second iteration, the active player can play two cards or attack with two cards, and the passive player can defend with two cards. In the third iteration, you can play three cards, and so forth. So, back to our example. The active player is the traitor. He's trying to do 2 points of damage. The passive player is the Imperial. So they can play this card to block if they want to. You don't have to block any. And they decide not to. They say, okay, I'm not going to block any damage. So they have to take 2 points of damage. Then the person doing the damage decides which opposing units get the damage. So he says, okay, well, I'm going to do 2 points of damage to this tank division, which is going to destroy it. So it goes back into the Imperial player's available units. When Imperial Army and Imperial tank divisions and Imperial Titans are destroyed, they go back into a pool where they can possibly come back into the game. Any other units, any traitor units, any Space Marine units or heroes that are eliminated in combat, they are just permanently out of the game. So there's a limited supply, especially for the traitors. But anyway, so they did 2 points of damage that goes into their discard pile. The passive player, the Imperial person, didn't do any shields, so they took the 2 points of damage and lost their tank. They still have their Imperial army. So now you go to the second iteration of combat, where now the Imperial player is now the active player, and the traitor player is passive. And so now the Imperial player gets to play cards to do damage. So they don't meet the requirement of any one of these special effects, so they're just going to play their 2 cards for 2 damage. Well, the traitor player has no more cards left, so he can't block any of that. So he gets 2 points of damage, which each one of these can only take one. Your rank is also the amount of damage you can take, if I didn't mention that. So both of these eliminate because they get 2 points of damage. One will eliminate this, one will eliminate this. So they're both eliminated. Now when corrupted units are eliminated, you just take off the traitor bases and put them back onto their regular bases, and then they're available for the Imperial player to use in the future. But that would be both these cards played. The Imperial player would still have his one unit, even though you could have done up to 8 iterations of combat. That ends the combat immediately because the traitor player has no more units. And if a combat ends and you still have, maybe the combat ends because you eliminated all the opponent's units and you both still have cards in your hand, combat cards in your hand, you just discard those cards. You don't keep them for future combats. You always start combat with a new set of cards depending on the rank of your units. We'll show one more example of combat that maybe is a little more complicated, a few more units. We'll say that the Imperial player is going to play this firefight card we looked at earlier, where he attacks a target area in this region from one adjacent area and fight 4 iterations of combat. Activate the target area and origin area. So we'll show like our example we were going to talk about earlier. The Imperial player says he's going to attack from this region to, he's going to attack the traitor player in this region or area. The region is this. Each individual space is an area. But anyway, first thing he'll do is activate the target area and the origin area. And then they can fight up to 4 iterations of combat. Now, because this isn't a coexistent battle, whoever is playing the attack order is the attacker, and whoever is the target is the defender. Now, in this case, it happens to be again that the Imperial player is the attacker and the Traitor player is the defender. But if the Traitor player played an attack order, then he would be the attack order. But in this example, the Imperial player is the attacker, the Traitor player is the defender. Then the attacker decides which units in the origin area are going to participate in the battle. So if he didn't want all of these units to participate, he could just point out, when you're in a fortified area like this, it's a little bit harder. If they were attacking like from here, you could say, okay, these guys aren't participating, only this guy's participating. But anyway, the attacker points out which units are participating in the battle. In this case, I'm going to say all my units are participating. The defending player always, in the target area, all his units always participate. So we'll say the attacker says all his units in the origin area are participating, and of course the target area, all their units have to participate. One rule I'll just mention briefly here: if the attacker has flying units, for instance, if the Traitor player was actually the one playing the attack order and they were attacking here, they can move one of their flying units from up to 3 spaces away to join in the combat if they wish. But again, I'm just mentioning that. Doesn't come up too often, but I just wanted to mention it. But in this case, the attacker is the Imperial player, and they don't have Thunderhawk flying units anyway. So they're the attacker, Traitor player is the defender. So now we decide combat cards. The Space Marines have a rank of 3 each, so that's 6, 7. Divided by 2 is 3.5, rounded up is 4, so he gets to draw 4 combat cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Traitor player, his Daemon Horde has rank of 3. His Space Marines have 3, so that's 6. His Chaos Warband has 2, so that's 8, so that's a total of 4. Well, 8 divided by 2 is 4, so he gets 4 combat cards. But he also has a hero, Angron, here, participating in the battle, so he gets to draw 2 hero combat cards. Now, if your hero is ever wounded in the wounded section here, they only get to draw 1 combat card instead of 2. But if you happen to have 2 heroes participating in the battle and only one of them is wounded, you'd still get to draw 2 hero combat cards. Now, you don't get to draw 2 hero combat cards for each. If you had 2 heroes in the battle, you still only draw a total of 2 combat cards. But again, if the only hero in the battle is wounded, you would only draw 1. Or if there was 2 in there and they were both wounded, you would only draw 1. But in this case of our battle, we draw 2 hero combat cards. The defender, which is the traitor this time, is going to decide who's active and who's passive for this first combat round. So he says he's going to be active. We'll move the combat iteration marker to the first space. So the traitor player is active, so he gets to play 1 card. So we'll say for his 1 card, he decides he wants to play this. Now, he can play this special effect because he has a hero in the battle. So that moves your opponent's initiative marker forward 1 space. Now, you'll see here it says 5 shields to counter. So the opponent could discard cards worth up to 5 shields to counter that and not have that happen. But in this case, he doesn't want to waste that many cards, so he says, no, I'm not going to do that. So he has to move his initiative marker forward 1 space. And then he's being dealt 2 points of damage. So that would go in the discard pile. Now, he can play a card to try to block that damage. So we'll say, yeah, he says he's going to block that damage with those 2 shields, so he plays that card. Okay, so that ends the first iteration of combat. So we go to the second iteration. Now, actually, hold on. I forgot that he is in a fortification. So a fortification actually blocks 2 points of damage. So he wouldn't have even had to play that card, because a fortification blocks 2 points of damage. Now, if it's breached, if you remember during setup, this factory fortification got breached. A breached fortification only blocks 1 point of damage, but this one's not breached. Well, now that I think about it, he does need to play that card, and I'll tell you why. I'm glad I'm catching this stuff because it helps me point stuff out. You only get the bonus of the fortification if you're the defending player, but if you remember, the Imperial player is the attacking player. They played the attack card. So the attacker and defender don't get that mixed up with who's active and who's passive each iteration. So because they are the attacking player, they don't get the benefit of the fortification, the 2 points that the fortification would normally block. So they did have to play that card to block the 2 points of damage. Now it does go to the second iteration, and the Imperial player can now play up to 2 cards because it's the second iteration. So they could play these, and because they are the attacking unit, remember they played the attack card, they can move their opponent's initiative marker forward 1 space. And of course the opponent could play up to 5 shields to counter if they wanted to, but we'll say no, they don't want to, so their initiative marker gets moved forward 1 space, and now they're getting dealt 4 points of damage. So they have to decide if they want to try to block those 4 points of damage, and we'll say they decide they're going to block 2 of them. So they play this card. That's one of their hero combat cards, so they're going to discard it here. So they block 2 damage, so they're going to get 2 damage. So then the Imperial player decides how to allocate those. He says, well, I'm just going to eliminate this Chaos Warband. It's got a rank of 2, so 2 points will destroy it. So it goes out. So now we go to the third iteration. Now the Traitor player is active, and they can play up to 3 cards. So they decide they're going to play all 3 of these. They don't meet any of the qualifications for any of the special effects, but they're playing 3 cards for a total of 7 damage. So now the the Imperial player can only block 1 point of that damage, or they can just decide to block none of it. Well, they decide they're going to go ahead and play this to block 1 of that 7 points of damage. So they get 6 damage, so the Traitor player decides how to allocate that. He decides to eliminate both of these White Scar Space Marines. That's a total of 6 points. 1 point was blocked. That leaves 1 Imperial army in there. That iteration then goes to the 4th iteration. The Imperial player has no cards to play to attack. The Traitor player still has 1 card, but it doesn't do him any good because we only fight 4 iterations of combat. So we finished the 4 iterations of combat. The Traitor player will just discard his last card. This card goes in the order card. Well, it would go into the reserve because it has the recycle. And then if he had played that from his hand, he would have to advance the initiative marker 2. But anyway, that's an example of combat. One part of combat I didn't mention is in any iteration except for the first iteration, the active player can decide to retreat. If they retreat, they have to retreat to a friendly or neutral territory and then mark that area territory they retreated to with a routed, one of their activation markers set to the routed side, which is just the opposite side of the regular activation. So that's the routed side. And the difference is whenever in a refresh phase or any phase where you would remove activation tokens, any that are on their routed side just get flipped over to their activated side and stay on the board. Also, there's some card effects that could route a unit, and anyway, that's similar. If the defender is routed, they have to route to an adjacent friendly or empty space and then mark that space with a routed activation marker. If they can't do that, then they're just eliminated. If the attacker has a unit that's routed, they don't move the origin area, but they do have to put a routed activation marker into their origin area, and then if any other further units are routed, then they're just eliminated. One thing we didn't look at in that combat example that had the hero Angron, each hero has a special ability other than being able to draw hero cards. Like Angron's special ability is when Angron attacks, which he didn't in that example, he was the defender, so this wouldn't have mattered. But when Angron attacks and is supported by World Eater Chaos Space Marines, which he was, these are the World Eaters, then before you draw combat cards at the start of battle, look at the top 4 cards of the combat deck. That's the regular combat deck, not the hero combat deck. And place each card on the top or bottom of the deck in any order. This does not apply when Angron was defending, which he was in the battle we were doing, which is why I didn't look at that. But I should have at least shown it anyway. So I just wanted to mention that each of the hero characters does have a special ability other than just drawing hero cards in combat. We've been talking about the strategic map and putting cards on the strategic map. I did want to point out that Horus's capital ship, the Vengeful Spirit, is on the strategic map and can have cards placed on it. The Imperial player does have a card or some cards that allow him to come to the Vengeful Spirit and attack it. Now this says that the command center is a fortified area, just like these plastic centers. And there are cards that allow players, the trader player, to bring units from the Vengeful Spirit onto the map. So you can get to the Vengeful Spirit and attack there, and the units from the Vengeful Spirit can come and attack down on Terra. So let's talk about how you win the game. You win the game immediately if you're the trader player, if you ever eliminate the Emperor, and if you're the Imperial player, if you ever eliminate Horus, then you immediately win the game. There is a spot on the initiative track where it says Spaceport Victory. If at any point somebody's initiative marker reaches that Spaceport Victory space and you control, your side controls all 4 spaceports, then you immediately win the game. So at that point or any point after, if you happen to gain control of all 4 spaceports, then your side will immediately win the game. And finally, if somebody's initiative marker reaches all the way to the end here, where the Imperial forces have held out till that point, then reinforcements arrive and the Imperial forces immediately win the game. So that's pretty much how you play. There's a few rules I left out. There's a lot of little, rules that I couldn't cover every one in this video. It's already very long as it is. I am going to go ahead and put the board back how it was at setup time and just go over a couple of example turns, and then we'll wrap up this long video. Alright, I think I've got everything set back up how we would have been right after we did our startup. So we've got our units coexisting and whatever. It's on the initiative track. It's the trader's turn. He takes his first turn. So I think for his action, he's going to play one of the cards he got to place at setup. So he's going to place execute an order from the strategic map. He's going to execute port landing. Place units from your stockpile or the Vengeful Spirit in a friendly or neutral spaceport in this region. Well, he played it from here, so the spaceport in that region is here, which is friendly to him because he started with units there. The unit's combined rank may not exceed 6, but because I played it from a strategic effect, the combined rank can be 12 instead of 6. So I'm going to place these units there. This Titan, so that's 4. These Space Marines, that's 3. These Space Marines are 3, so that's 10. And then this Chaos Thunderhawk, that's 12. And whenever you place units with a port landing or a drop pod, you can also take the Chaos player or the Trader player in this scenario starts with 2 of his heroes not on the in his stockpile, so he's gonna also take a hero. You can do that. I mean, even though it doesn't specify it in here, he doesn't count as one of your ranks of 12. So I plan on taking those units now because I'm doing port landing in this port. The Imperial player, he has 1 defense laser adjacent to that spot, so he gets to make some defense laser attempts on those units as they try to come down. So first we'll say my Titan's going to try to come down. So he's only got 1 laser, so he draws a card, looks at the defense laser, 1 miss, so he successfully gets in there. Oh, we got old. Alright, so he successfully gets in there. Alright, next we'll say it's this Chaos Space Marine. Draw a card. 1 defense laser, that's a miss. He successfully gets in there. Alright, next this other Chaos Space Marine. Draw a card. 1 defense laser, that's a miss. So he gets in there successfully, so my last unit that can be shot at is the Thunderhawk. So he draws a card, 1 defense laser, that's a miss. So they all get in there. The hero can't be destroyed with defense lasers. So everyone successfully got in there with my port landing card. It's a recyclable, so it just goes in my reserve. So I'll just make my reserve right here. And now I have to advance the initiative marker 1. Because it costs 1 initiative point to execute an order from the map. So now there has been a change of initiative, so we have to resolve all coexistent battles. So remember, we've got 4 places. We've got a coexistent battle here, 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 and here. So the Imperial player gets to decide the order those are done in. So we'll just start here. These 2 Titans coexist in the same space here with these 2 Trader tank divisions. So the Titans have a rank of 8 total, so divided by 2, that's going to be 4 cards. There's no hero in there, so they just have 4 cards. The Trader has the 2 Imperial tank divisions, which is They're 2 each, so a total of 4 divided by 2, so 2 cards for them. Remember, in a coexistent battle, the trader's considered the defender, so he gets to decide if he wants to be active first, and he does. It's the first iteration of combat. In a coexistent battle you can play up to 8, but obviously with this few amount of cards, we're not going to get that far. So he doesn't meet any of the, well, he does meet the any unit, but it would eliminate this unit to eliminate an opposing unit of the same or lower rank. Well, those opposing units are a higher rank, so that wouldn't do him any good. So he's going to play his card to do 3 damage. The Imperial player says he's going to play this card to block 2 of that damage. So 1 point of damage will get assigned to one of these Titans. Alright, so there's the 1 damage. Now we advance the combat iteration. Now he gets to play, now we're in iteration 2, so the Imperial player can play 2 cards. He's not attacking a fortification. He is considered the attacker. So he could get this special move your opponent's initiative marker forward 1. So he says he's going to play this card and this card. And he's going to use this special effect. So the opposing player, he's only got 1 card. He can't block it with 5 shields, so his thing gets moved forward 1, and then he's got to block 6 damage. Or take 6 damage. Well, he can block 2, but he's still going to get 4, which is going to eliminate both of these units. So now we just take them off their trader bases, and they go back on the regular bases, and given back to the Imperial player for his stockpile where they could possibly return, and these just go back in the base with the trader bases. Alright, and this 1 card that's left just goes into the discard pile, so that's the end of that combat. I'm going to, just to save time, I'm going to go ahead and resolve these other combats off camera, and I'll be back. Alright, I finished those other combats that had to take place. This is the result here. Nothing really changed too much here, and they did take out the Trader Tank Division here. So that's it for coexistent battles. Now we would check stacking limits. I don't think we have a worry about that anywhere. So now we go on to that's the end of the round. So now we go to the action step of the Imperial player. Oh wait, we did have an event phase that occurred, so the Trader player does get to draw that event card. See what it says. Do immediately. The Trader player chooses 1 area and then inflicts an orbital bombardment there. Alright, he can choose anywhere, but fortifications would block damage. He wants to, we'll just say he's going to do it here. So he's going to choose a precise orbital bombardment. We look at our result, and that's 2 damage. So that's enough to kill this guy, so the Trader player says he's going to take this guy out. Alright, now it's the action step of the Imperial player. He's now the current player since he's closest to the start of the initiative track. He doesn't have any cards on the strategic map, so he's going to have to do something with a card from his hand. I did forget when the Trader player did his port landing, he should have activated that area, so I've done that. Okay, for the Imperial player, he's going to play this redeploy from his hand. Because it's recyclable, it'll go in his reserve, but he can move any units and heroes from any number of areas to any number of destination areas in this region. So I have to choose a destination area in whatever region that I want. So I'm going to choose this as my destination area. Well, actually, I can do any number of destination areas, so I'm going to do 2 destination areas, and then I can move units, as long as they can reach there. So I'm going to move these guys and my hero there. And I'm going to move this Adeptus Mechanicus. No, he can't make it because 1 crossing that would be 2, 3. Well, maybe I didn't need to activate that area. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to activate this area because I'm not moving anybody from there. So I'll activate this area and move this Adeptus Mechanicus in here. And I'll also move these Space Marines in here. Alright, so that's my redeploy. It cost me 2 because I played it from my hand. So there's not a change of initiative because I still, if the 2 are on, if one's on top of the other, it still maintains the initiative. So since there's no change of initiative, there's no coexistent battles, there's no other event. The current player didn't pass a new special phase, so we just go to the action step again. So it's still the Imperial player's turn. He's gonna place an order on the strategic map. He's going to place this assault card on the strategic map, and that's going to cost him 1 initiative. So now we do have a change of initiative, so we have to fight any coexistent battles. We do have one here, and we do have one here. This one should be pretty quick. They each just get 1 card, so we'll just do that on camera. The traitor player is first because in coexistent battles they're the defender. He plays this one for 3 damage. It doesn't matter. Even if he blocks 2, it doesn't matter. He's still going to get defeated because it's just going to take 1 point to defeat him. So that's the end of that battle. Pretty quick. This guy is defeated. And this coexistent battle is probably going to end about the same. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he gets 2 cards. And the Imperial player is just going to get 1 card. So, of course, the traitor player is going to play this for 3. He can only block 1, so he's still going to get hit with 2 damage. He can only take 1 damage, so he's killed. Alright, that's going to be all our coexistent battles. We don't have any special phases, no new special phase. So now it's the action step, and now it's the traitor player has initiative, so it's him that gets to take an action. And as you'll notice, he currently controls, although tenuously, all 4 spaceports. So if he got the initiative all the way up to here, so obviously before the initiative, somebody's initiative marker gets to here, the Imperial player is going to have to take back a couple of these, at least one of these spaceports. But anyway, it's the traitor player's turn, and he wants to shore up some strength here. So he's going to play another one of the orders he placed at the beginning of the game, drop pods. Place up to 3 Chaos Space Marines or Thunderhawk flights in any combination from your stockpile or the Vengeful Spirit into any area in this region. Well, he played it in this region, so he could place them in any area. He's going to place them on the spaceport. The units may be placed in enemy contested and or fortified areas, but not the Vengeful Spirit area, or an enemy area in the Palace region, and then activate the area where the units are placed. So I'm going to place them here. It can be 3 Chaos Space Marine or Thunderhawk units in any combination. So he put 2 Chaos Thunderhawk flights and 1 Space Marines. Now this doesn't have a recycle order, so it just goes into his discard pile, and that cost him 1 initiative to play it because he played it from the strategic map. So we still don't have a change of initiative, so there's no Nothing else to do. We didn't pass any special phases or anything, so it's still the trader player's turn. He gets to take another action. Oh, you know what? I forgot. The Imperial player had a defense laser here, so he gets to fire on those. So we'll do that. We'll say he gets to fire on this Chaos Thunderhawk once. It's one laser, so that's a miss. Alright, he's going to fire on the other Chaos Thunderhawk flight. That's a miss. And now he's firing on the Space Marines as they come down. And that's a miss. Okay. When you have one laser, the odds are not very good anyway. So, for his other action, he's going to play this, execute this order from the strategic map that he had in this region here. And it's another drop pods order, so that'll go into the discard. But he gets to place up to 3 Chaos Space Marine or Thunderhawk flights. And of course, he's got to activate the region. Now this time, let's see, we still just have one, yeah, just still one defense laser adjacent there. So he's going to bring these 2 Space Marines in this Chaos Thunderhawk flight. So one defense laser, the Imperial player, first he's going to shoot at these Space Marines. Oh, they're killed. So now they're out of the game. Alright, so now this Thunderhawk. One, that's a miss, so he lands successfully. And finally this last miss, so he lands successfully. So we did lose one Space Marine, and he's going to bring his last hero, Magnus the Red, down also. Again, that can't be shot at by the defense laser. Alright, so he played that drop pod that costs him 1 initiative. So now we've had a change of initiative. Do we have any coexistent battles? No, we do not. And we didn't pass any special phases. So now it would go to the Imperial player's turn. I think I'll do one more combat, and then I think we'll wrap it up. So the Imperial player would like to play the card he placed here to let him attack, this target area from any number of adjacent origin areas, so he could attack from all of these. But because he's got activation tokens here and here, he wouldn't be able to attack with those guys, just these guys and this guy, and that's not going to be enough to defeat all of those. So he's going to have to wait till later when they refresh, and he can pick up those activation tokens. But just to show another battle, he's going to play Firefight from his hand. Attack a target in this region from one adjacent origin area. Fight 4 iterations of combat. Activate the target area and the origin area. Alright, he's going to attack this spaceport from here, where he's got these 3 Space Marines and Rogel Dorn. So he's going to activate the origin area and the target area. And they got Mortorian. They got some Death Guard Space Marines. They got a Titan and some Chaos Warband. God, see what I mean about not being enough room here? Alright, well this guy's in the battle. We know he's up here. Alright, so let's check both of their powers. Rogel Dorn, when supported by at least 1 unit of Imperial Fists in a battle whose target area is an unbreached fortification. Oh, well, my target area is not an unbreached fortification. So there's really no benefit here. So now let's check Mortorians. Alright, Mortorian, when is supported by Death Guard Space Marines, and he is supported by 1 Death Guard Space Marine. Imperial units engaged against Mortorian in battle have their combat rating reduced by 1 to a minimum of 1. This effect applies first if other effects also affect those units' rank. This effect can immediately eliminate units if their damage equals or exceeds their new rank. Alright, so all the ranks of these guys are reduced by 1. So instead of 3 points each, they're 2 points each. So 2, 4, 6 divided by 2, they get 3 cards plus 2 for their hero. Alright, and he's got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Divided by 2 would be 4.5. So we round up to 5 cards plus 2 for his hero. Alright, now because the Imperial player is the attacker, the Traitor player is the defender, so he gets to decide whether he wants to be active or passive. He's going to be active, so he gets to deal damage first. Alright, he can play 1 card since it's the first iteration. He's going to play this one, and because he has a hero, he gets to inflict 1 point of damage on the opposing hero. So we get Rogel Dorn's hero damage marker and move it up 1 space here on the hero damage track. And then he does 2 points of damage, or he's attempting to. Now the Imperial player can block that if he wants to, and we will say that he does want to, so he's going to spend this to block those 2 points of damage. Alright, now we go to the second iteration. Now it's the Imperial player gets to play up to 2 cards. So he's going to play both of these cards. Now this special ability, even though they're attacking unit, 2 opposing units of your choice whose rank is less than this unit's rank are routed. Well, their rank is reduced to 2, so there isn't anybody there that has a rank less than theirs, so that doesn't do them any good. They do have this one. They do have Space Marines in the battle, so you can remove your normal activation marker from the target area, or flip your activation marker in the target area to its normal side. So they'll just go ahead and remove it. Alright, and then they're dealing 5 points of damage. So the Traitor player decides he's going to block all of that. He can only play 2 cards, so he can block 4 points of it. So he blocks 4 points of damage, so he's got to take 1 damage. And the Imperial player assigns it to this Chaos Warband, so it can take 1 more damage before it's eliminated. Well, let me try to get it on there. Alright, I got it on there. So now we go to the third iteration of combat. It's back to the Traitor player. He can play up to 3 cards. So he has 4 cards left. He's going to play these 3. He can't do any of the special abilities, but that's 8 points of damage. So the Imperial player, he can only block 3 of it, but he says that's what he's going to do. So he blocks 3 of it, so he's got to take 5 points of damage. Because their rank is reduced, these are each eliminated because they're down to 2. So they get eliminated, and the last Space Marine there will get 1 damage put on him. Alright, so I put the 1 damage. Now, remember, they're not getting the benefit of the fortification there because they're the attackers. If they were the defenders, they would be getting the benefit of the fortification and getting to subtract 2 from every time they're damaged. But anyway, now we go to the 4th iteration. And remember, this card I played is only fight 4 iterations of combat. So we're at the 4th iteration. It's the Imperial player's turn. He doesn't have any more cards to play, so he can't play any. That's the end of the combat because that's the 4th iteration, so the battle just ends, but the Imperial player's not doing too good. So, and he had to advance his marker twice because he played that from his hand, so that cost 2 initiative. And now we would have an event phase, so let's see what we got. The Imperial player may place up to 2 Imperial tank divisions in any area adjacent to the edge of the board. So he could take 2 of his Imperial tank divisions and, he'll put them right here. So maybe he can come in and help attack. But I think that's all I'm going to show. This video's gone way, way longer than I was hoping it would. In this instance, the Imperial player at this point kind of looks like he's getting his butt kicked. But anyway, you can see how the game plays. I think it's pretty fun. Like I said, I've just played it this past week by myself to refresh myself with the rules. But every other time I've actually played it against somebody, and I've always had a really good time. So, I mean, this game's old. I don't know. It's definitely not in print anymore, but you could probably find a used copy somewhere. But I really enjoy it. I mean, it's not a game where your units are going to be moving all over the board. You're usually going to be in pretty tight areas, just battling back and forth. But I enjoy it. It's probably one of my favorite two-player games. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.